Here we are for another Ivan and James Martin podcast, relatively speaking. And our guest today, I'm delighted to say, is Nigel Carr. Nigel, you're very welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's it seems appropriate with Ireland doing well thus far in the Six Nations that we should have you in to talk a bit of rugby, to talk a bit of personal and so on. And normally in these situations, I would rattle off a whole load of stats and say about caps won and things done and all that. But one thing caught my eye when I was sort of looking through a few things ahead of doing this, and it said Nigel Carr, comma, one of the finest players ever to pull on an Ireland jersey. And I said to myself, don't be clever, Ivan. You couldn't really top that. That was a wonderful compliment. You must be proud of that sort of thing.
Do you know what? I wouldn't have written it if I hadn't felt that it was true. No, I mean, I've really enjoyed my rugby career. How familiar I am with current rugby, provincial or international, I'm not quite so sure. I used to be a lot more up to date with things. But I mean, I had my good times and bad in it. I had my disappointments, lots of those. But I was very fortunate as well to have some good times. And we were lucky as well at the time I played for Ireland. We weren't always good. In fact, typically we were not up at the top end of the table. But we did manage to have some success, won a championship, triple crown, undefeated in the championship, and so on. And I think we're sort of kindly remembered for that. Irish rugby nowadays is a very different beast, and they're consistently successful, year after year, and it's great to look at it. The only thing that seems to be beyond us is a really good performance in a World Cup. But apart from that, we're doing really well.
Well, I was going to say, pardon my cynicism, but we always seem to peak early when it comes to the World Cup. We go into the World Cup and people are saying, oh, Ireland are number one in the world, or Ireland are, one of the favourites. And that brings its own pressure. But, it's very easy sitting here watching it and saying, the boys just aren't themselves. But, here we were in the World Cup just a few months ago, and we have another disappointment. And then, like 3 months later, we come into the Six Nations and we knock the pants off France, which is where nobody ever wanted to go back in the day. I mean, it is quite a change, isn't it?
I mean, I suppose, whenever you look at it, it's the same in every walk of life, whether it's acting, journalism, or whatever else. I mean, it's competitive to get to the top. People don't say, you go on ahead, you're better than I am, you win them. Everybody's striving to do the very best they can. Therefore, to get to the top really is something, and it means all the more when you do it. I think Ireland have been disappointing. This isn't the last, most recent World Cup we went in as number one in the world. Not for the first time. We did it in the previous World Cup as well, and again, disappointed. And it's not even as if we're getting to World Cup finals and just falling slightly short. We're not even making semi-finals, quarter-finals. And whenever you're, top 8 in the world, you ought to be every year. Then it's a bit of a disappointment that we only just make the quarter-final. So I don't know what's going wrong with Irish rugby from that perspective. Whether there's some sort of psychological element to it that means that they can't quite handle the pressure. I think it's just one of those things. I thought that a fantastic chance this year. I think their performances were as good as anybody. I mean, for South Africa to win the World Cup in the way they did, by the very narrowest of margins in the matches that went through, they must count themselves as incredibly lucky to do it. But they're the world champions all the same. So I think we just have to keep looking. Next World Cup, fingers crossed.
I think as well, whenever you win anything in any sport, It doesn't say 2024 World Cup winners, South Africa, brackets, fortunate to win,
Uh-huh.
or all that. It
Yeah.
just says winner.
Yep, absolutely.
And, Alan Solomons, who used to manage Ulster, a South African gentleman himself, and a gentleman as well, it must be. He was great to deal with if you were in the press. And he said to me once, Ivan, professional sport is about winning. Once you have won, you assess the performance. And then you say, we got a performance. Isn't that a bonus? And, that is where we are.
I mean, I think it's interesting because often whenever I hear the modern players talk, they talk about the performance. I mean, that's the thing. That's all that they, is within their gift. That's all that they can affect. Make sure the performance is as good as it can be, and then if it's good enough, you'll get your rewards and so on from that. I think whenever I was playing, it was more, didn't really quite think in that way. It was just about winning, and I don't know whether your performance changed so that you might have done a good enough performance to win, but in another situation where the opponent was tougher, you needed to raise your game and produce an even better performance. It wasn't just about the performance, as it were. It was about who your opposition were and what you needed to do to win. But I think again on the other side, you can't but look at Ireland through the Six Nations Championships over the last number of years and say, but they've cracked that as well as anybody in the Northern Hemisphere has. So I'm delighted that they're doing so well. We've just had the recent news as well. Dan McFarland, the Ulster coach, is moving on to pastures new, and I say it, I think it's because, like life and like everything people do in life, it's often competitive. And people don't say, you going ahead, you have to pull out the stops and be excellent, to win it. And if you're a winner, you deserve it. You've beaten off a lot of competition.
Professional sport and winning gets you that moment of glory. But the next season, if you have a bad start or you aren't just doing so well the following year, people don't say, well, the one some whatever last year, so he's allowed a bit of we'll give him a bye ball here on this. Look at David Moyes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's being pilloried at the minute, and yet he gave West Ham their first trophy in decades only 6 months ago.
Well, I'd be a bit of an Evertonian, so I can remember him when he was at Goodison Park,
Yes.
and was a bit disappointed to lose him from there. And it's not that Everton have gone from strength to strength from that point on. They're sort of kicking about the bottom all the time. So yeah, it's difficult, and say there's a lot of pressure on people nowadays in the sport. I suppose that I mean, the fans, I think, are always demanding. In many respects, in Ulster, the Ulster fans, I think, have been very understanding of the relative lack of success that they've had. Now we've got to change a coach, and whether that'll make a huge difference, it's hard to say. The game itself has changed an awful lot. So it was amateur whenever I played. We like to think that we sort of trained as professionally as we could for the time available and so on to us. We would have loved to had all day to train and prepare and so on for matches coming up. So I think the fans, yeah, they'll always be. I mean, I'll sort of always be an Evertonian, irrespective of whatever division they're in. But I think they are more demanding now as well, perhaps than they were in the past. As you say, even if you'd had relatively recent success, you want it again, and you certainly don't want your rivals to have it at your expense.
No. It's interesting, yet you still love going to the Ulster games,
I
don't you?
mean, I still love going to not just the Ulster games, but I've been invited down a couple of times to see Annan playing, and it's that atmosphere that going out playing on the day, and that's really lovely. And the season ticket holder for Ulster, with my mum, and it's all down to like a family gathering where you go out to have fun. If you win the game, that's really good, and I'm sure that's really good experience for you from then up to now.
No, absolutely. I think there is a real sort of camaraderie and family spirit in it all, and I think the crowds that Ulster get now are fantastic and they're very loyal. I mean, the game is say from back. I started in round about 1979. I think was the first Ulster Cup, and played into the mid 80s. At that time, club matches would have gone on at the same time on a Saturday afternoon as an Ulster match. They didn't even get the regular players coming to the game because they were playing their own games. The crowds were so much smaller than they are now, and the focus that there was in Ulster was very different too. And that you only had your provincial games and maybe a couple of touring sides and so on that would play as well. So it's just so different now from the professional aspect to the amateur days. But I think that element of rugby with the family thing and the bonding that goes on is still really important and still there. My biggest concern is that rugby's really seems to be moving to more a spectator sport rather than a participation sport. So my old club would have had maybe 7 teams turning out on a Saturday. Now they'd be lucky to have 3, more like 2, and that's not unusual, from an Ulster perspective as well.
I'm going to talk to you about club rugby in due course, but just when you bring up the family aspect at Ulster, it seems to me, and the figures bear this out, that Ulster, if they play on Friday night, can sell out the game, not a problem. But if they're playing Saturday or Sunday, you could get a ticket late on in the week. You think that Fridays are it, don't you?
I do, yeah. Well, that's my point of view, really. Because if you go on a Friday, you get a good atmosphere. Saturday, Sunday, it's a mix.
Yeah.
It's not that feeling, but it's really lovely just to go on a Friday, to play yourself and go and have fun and win the game.
Yeah.
I like that on a Friday.
I don't know why that is. I mean, I can remember when the lights were brought to Ravenhill in the first instance. Even prior to that, there used to be a competition called the Bass Boston Cup over in Bangor. It was, I think, it was a Tuesday night in Bangor, and that too had a really good atmosphere. Whether it was the sort of the unusual sort of thing of playing matches in underneath the lights, but yeah, Ulster, since they brought the lights in the Friday night games, I mean, everybody's always loved those, and I think that is the preferred time to play rugby in Ulster.
Yeah, TV schedules mess around with it a bit, but the optimum time remains Friday night. Talking of Ravenhill, and you might have forgotten about this,
I
you
have,
and Nigel Carr have something in common. You have both played at Ravenhill with varying degrees of distinction, it must be said. Do you remember when you scored a try at Ravenhill?
Yes, I did. I actually had a nice memory of it. Where you slide on the grass and score a try, and everyone loved it. And it was like a public favourite when you do score a try. But I'm sure with your experience in that, I'm sure that's a different ball game.
Well, do you know what? I'm not sure. I think the essence of the thing is the same. When you score a try, it's a bit like when I used to throw pullovers down, out in the park, and you'd score a goal. I mean, the essence of the thing is the same. If you've got so many thousand people cheering along with you, well, that adds to it all. But yeah, I think it's the same sort of
experience. It's not the repeat.
Well, it is a bit. I think there's some core thing which is similar, but yeah, I mean it must be very different, I suppose, doing it at Lansdowne Road with 50,000 people doing it versus at the park with 5 people watching the match. But playing at Ravenhill is great. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, I mean, it's just really nice because I play type rugby on the Sunday, and we always get asked to play at half time. So that experience of it all was fantastic.
With the crowd in there?
With the crowd being doesn't matter how many people, you go have fun, have a burger or a chip. It's nice,
Yeah,
right? You know,
yeah.
the
No, absolutely. I think it's great to try and the game is broadening in so many ways. That women's rugby and so on is really getting a hold now. I remember watching the World Cup final a few years ago at Ravenhill, and I was saying to you earlier, being across a couple of weeks ago at Winchester Rugby Club with the Malone Tornadoes, a mixed ability rugby team, and they were over sort of showing what the game was like, and people from that area were coming, and hopefully they might take it on as well, because there's a place. I mean, that was always a thing of rugby. I think it always catered for the tall fellas and the fellas that were a bit broader than they wanted to be, and the fast guys. It could accommodate all sort of body types, and everybody was welcome. I think that's sort of going even beyond what it was years ago as well.
uh, because I would have friends who play on that team. They always say to me, not just playing contact rugby, which they love, but the passionate, the friends, play the game. But it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's just a game.
Yeah, there is an element of that. I think I wonder sometimes when I see things like boxing, another sport where Northern Ireland sort of excelled, where people are bashing the heads off each other, and at the end of it, they can be the best of friends. And I think there's something about that in rugby as well. When there's that sort of physical contest, and you're pitting yourself against the other person, that by the end of it, you can shake their hand and have a pint in the bar or whatever afterwards, and a bit of cracks.
See, that's always lovely. Anyway.
But the night that James scored the try at Ravenhill, the match is blown up. And the idea was then to get them off the pitch so the real fair could begin again. So they're all walking off diagonally, but not your man here. He walks down behind the posts and right along the sideline in front of the stand. And of course, the crowd love it, and they're all up giving him an ovation. And he's waving up and milking it. And the players were back out on the pitch, and then they started applauding him. But
Were you always a performer, James? Do you always like a
Yes,
crowd? Yes.
I always do like a crowd, but it's just really nice just to not just uh, to be involved, but also it's really nice to milk things, if you know what I mean by that. Because feel like he's gonna try or feel like he to get the atmosphere going up and
It's a good feeling all round. I mean, the
it
crowd
is.
love it as well.
Yeah, and you see that's why that I did a thing, um, in the Nevin Spence Centre,
Yes.
and they told me what's your favourite day to go, and I said it's Raleigh because it's a lovely feeling. It's nice. It's a family night out, and you go and have fun. And because of having that in, it means you can soak every single thing in, just like that.
It's a big thing. I suppose it's another sort of passion in my life as well, not just in rugby, the sports side. Within the Nevin Spence Centre, there's the history of Ulster rugby and so on. And whenever you look back at the Willie John McBrides and the Sid Millers and the Mike Gibsons and so on, there's a fantastic tradition. We've only just passed the 100th year of Ravenhill as well. There was a little event to sort of celebrate that. And one of the things that I've been working with, along with Lady Mary Peters, who I know you know well, to try and see if we could establish a sports museum here in Northern Ireland. Something that would celebrate the past, but more than that, inspire the future. To bring new people along, to sort of recognise it's not just the David Beckhams or the Messis. People from here, the George Bests and Derek Dugans and everything, and in so many walks of life, acting now included, that have excelled and been as good as anybody else in the world, better than most. And I think it'll be a great thing because sport, I think, is a great way of bringing people together as well, encouraging healthier lifestyles, and also maybe just giving people that sort of feeling that, do you know what, I can do it in whatever their chosen walk of life might be. So we're still sort of hopeful that maybe someday that might come about.
the old museum building down in College Square West, it
Yeah.
probably is, Right. I know a few years ago, Mary P. and yourself looked at that, and it all got so far, but not far enough. And I'm driving past it the other day, and I'll look at the building as I always do, and it's just sitting there. Like, what is the point of that?
I think, I suppose, we recognize as well that these aren't the easiest times. Whenever you look at the health service and our schools and every people out in strike and, our budget and fiscal position and everything else, that, there are a lot of priorities and people's health and well-being is probably ahead of that. I mean, I'd accept that. But I think these other things as well, hopefully it'll find its place. It'll be recognized as being something which actually could, as a tourist attraction, one of a number, draw more people in, make money for the province and so on as well. But funding for any project at the moment is difficult. But we still think that, I mean, nearly the most frustrating thing at times is everybody we spoke to about it, including the politicians, were very positive in relation to it. But we could never just get over that stage and actually get something established. But I think it's still a good idea. It's still a sound proposition, and hopefully it'll have its day.
I mean, if you talk about overachieving, our little part of the world here, you look at Mary, forever the golden girl, right? Joey Dunlop, in more recent times on motorbikes, Johnny Ray,
Yeah.
you know, and so it goes. You had the snooker boys who did well, and the Higginses and the Taylors and so on. But even now, we have still got young Allen in there,
Absolutely.
at one of the top players, and so we go. Uh, when you and I were at school, we were a bit of a Cinderella nation for cricket. But now Ireland are playing at the top level. They may not be one of the top sides, but they're at the top table. And we've discussed rugby. And actually, when you think about the rugby, the point you were making about Ireland having really come to have the self belief when it comes to the Six Nations, they maybe have just to go that bit further in a World Cup. Almost like the catalyst was the Grand Slam for Ireland, which since then the self belief has been immense,
Yeah.
you know? And I mean, the thought of a sports museum, there is so much amazing memorabilia out there, isn't there?
Well, that was one of the things as well. Whenever we were putting the idea forward, people were getting in touch with us and offering us, sporting memorabilia, which we didn't feel we could take on, and we did have a duty of care to that, and need to, in certain instances, make sure that the atmosphere and so on was appropriate, so these things didn't go mildewed or whatever
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
So so there's still so much, but I think, as you say, that we're something like 0.025% of the world's population. And yet, here's another, even this in the last week, Daniel Whiffin's become a world champion
Yeah.
in swimming as well. And he was saying, like, the likes of Jonathan Ray. And, whenever you look back over a whole range of sports, we really people that have excelled and that other people elsewhere in the world look up to. And when you give it, our background in the Troubles and the sort of reputation that this part of the world had for a while, it's great to really focus on something that's positive. And I know through sport, and even whenever you think of Ireland, Irish rugby, and that being done on the all-island basis, so that the north and south of Ireland playing together, and not bringing people together from very different political backgrounds and very different political views or aspirations, and yet we can still that's been an opportunity where people have been lifelong friends and can accommodate differences of opinion and still get on with things and still remain friends. So, I never see sport as being the panacea for everything. But even if the last World Cup in South Africa winning that, I think, and I was there in 1995 for the first Rugby World Cup that they were allowed back into after apartheid and won. I think they too think that there's something within rugby which has helped bring their people together, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, black or white. Sport, it's not the be all and end all, but certainly can make a positive influence.
I'm interested to talk to you for a moment about the Schools Cup. The Schools Cup is still a massive part of every rugby playing school's life. And people will say, but it's dominated by Methody and Campbell and Inst, and the other grammar schools or rugby playing schools don't get a look in. Now, there's an element of truth in that, but the other grammar schools or rugby playing schools have made inroads. Now, you went to Regent, which would be deemed as one of those, and you had a successful time. The fact that you and Phil Matthews played for Regent, you played for Ards, you played for Ulster, Ireland, and so it went. And, the the years that you had playing for Ireland, the two of you there, I mean, that was an amazing thing for Regent House.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Schools Cup in Ulster is just something like the second oldest rugby competition in the world. I was back down at Regent this year to see them. Had some success at Regent in that the first year I played, we never lost a match apart from the first round of the Schools Cup.
Yeah.
The last year I played, we never lost a match apart from the final.
Final.
I broke my leg in the quarter. I was captain of the side, broke my leg in the quarter final. And that would be, I'd certainly count that as one of the disappointments. I was saying I've had lots of good times, I've had disappointments as well, and that was a huge disappointment. And there's many people that would still look back, even some of the WhatsApp groups that I'm in, guys, even this year in the last month or so, we're circulating photographs from 1974 and their Schools Cup team. So the Schools Cup, and they'd gone on to play at Twickenham and Lansdowne Road and all around the world. So yeah, the Schools Cup still means an awful lot to people, and is a good grounding for rugby. And say it's just that thing then of nowadays, I'm not so sure so many people follow on their schools rugby with going to club rugby and elsewhere. It just seems to be the ones that aspire really to go to the top that continue on, and there are not so many club players. And it'd be nice to see more people keeping that going.
Yeah, some people would argue that such is the pressure now of playing first 15 rugby at school, and the fact that they go away, many of them, for warm weather training during the Christmas holidays to prepare for the Schools Cup, and that it's such a pressure that by the time they have done their A levels and go to university, they're just sort of want to take some time out and have a pint.
Yeah, I think I was even the same whenever I was about. There were schools that really were intense in their preparation for the Schools Cup. The schools typically were those, some of them that you'd mentioned there, that had a real reputation for success in the competition. And some people found it too much. It went beyond just being a sport and for enjoyment, and became a wee bit too pressurized. And I think, yeah, I mean, as you go on in sport or try to, to go to provincial or international level, there's pressure. There's pressure in any job. As say, there's that competitive element that people are always out to knock you off and be top dog themselves. And maybe at school it's just a wee bit too much for some. There may even be some that excel in that and like that sort of environment as well, and move on into really highly competitive rugby. But I do have this thing that I'm really keen that yes, our teams are competitive at national and international level, but there's definitely a place for rugby. The biggest thing that I missed whenever I stopped playing, there were two things. One was sort of the crowds at Lansdowne Road, But I really miss just going down on a Monday night or a Wednesday night to my local club, an old wet night and dark, and getting the togs on, having a bit of crack, and going out and having a laugh, and coming back in, getting a shower, and heading home again. And I think that my friends are typically all those friends that I made when I was playing rugby. They've retained and maintained that sort of friendship and been friends for life. So, yeah, I think it's a great game. Lots of other great games in sports as well. But I do worry a wee bit just that there are maybe not so many people that are getting that all the mental health benefits and camaraderie and friendship that they could by playing and being involved in a rugby club or a sports club.
Jimmy Davidson, you will remember. And Jimmy spoke out against the All Ireland League. And I said to him, "Why, Jimmy?" And he said, "I'll tell you why. It's going to end up with the provinces becoming club sides. And a lot of the smaller clubs are going to disappear or be diminished because they just won't be able to afford to travel to Cork or wherever. And, you know, when you were playing, Ards, your club, were a major club in Ulster, as were Bangor. And both of those clubs have suffered. Collegians and North have gone altogether, albeit uh, the spirit lives on, allegedly, with Harlequins. But, it's. I often think of Jimmy D and what he used to say. Do, can we say he had a point, or has he been proven correct, or what do you think?
Well, Jimmy was a bit of a visionary. Jimmy was a great player, first of all, a great wing forward, played Dungannon. Played against South Africa, I think, broke his teeth in the match against South Africa, spat them out and played on. I mean, that was the sort of folk
Yeah.
that Jimmy
Well,
was.
yeah.
Had a really great time influencing Queen's University when there were people like Trevor Ringland, David Irwin, Philip Rainey, Philip Matthews, Brian McCall. All went on to play international rugby and then coached at Ireland, but only for a very limited time. His approach didn't seem to sort of fit with what the other players were sort of expecting. But yeah, I think he had a hope. He had a like to have an extended Ulster season, as it were. What we got, was an All Ireland league where it now means that there's a lot more expense for clubs. And a lot of time for the individuals involved as well. If you're going to play a match in Cork that weekend and you're going to stay the Friday night down there before the game to make sure that you're prepared and so on for the match, there's a lot of expense and time, and there are teams I think that feel that's not really for us. We can't really do that. So I think the game's constantly evolving. It'll constantly need to keep evolving as well, because I'm not sure that they've got everything just right at the moment. I think, as I say, Ireland are rejoice. It's a glorious time for Irish rugby by and large at the moment. We're never normally as successful as we are, but it's something that that we need to keep our eyes on and keep adapting and changing to try and make sure we stay at the top, because there'll always be someone keen to knock us off.
And see, that's always hard when you're from the top. Doesn't really matter if it's the top or the middle or the bottom. But I'm still that atmosphere of anywhere beginning of the table of rugby leagues. It's very different ballgame now from then.
Yeah, no, I mean, the things have changed enormously. Particularly whenever you look at the size of players. Not that they weren't big in my day. I mean, I would have been a stone and a half lighter than the second lightest in the Irish pack, so I was quite small and light at that time. And we had still players. I remember in a Lions match playing with a chap, Wade Dooley, English second row, came from Farden, Lancashire. We used to call him the Blackpool Tar, because he was 6'8" and I think nearly pushing about 20 stone. But we had a Lions match in Cardiff on one occasion. He was sharing with Donald Lennon, the great second row from Munster, and Lennon heard him running back up the corridor. the rest of the world team was staying at the same hotel as we were. And this huge man burst in through the door and says, "You should see the South Africans. They're enormous," which which didn't go down well with Lennon, who was a wee bit worried after that. But I'd say they've always been big people, but now the average size, is huge, and I think there's suppose there are concerns and so on as well, given the size and the impact and tackles and so on as well. That some people may be less inclined for their young boy or girl to take up rugby because the potential for injury and perhaps serious injury. So the structures of the game, the players of the game, even the rules of the game to some extent are changing all the time. They've changed a good bit since back in the days whenever I played.
And what was that feeling, Meg, for playing with the Lions? Was it a different experience?
It was funny because again, James, it was one of my I suppose it was a pleasure, but also a disappointment. We were supposed to go on tour to South Africa, but it was the only Lions tour that was ever cancelled, and that was because of apartheid. And it was the International Board's centenary, so they had a match against the rest of the world side, and it was a fantastic. They were fantastic opposition. So I was delighted to play for the Lions. It was a great honour, but I'm not sure that I got the sort of the Lions spirit that you build up, going with other people that you would normally play against, the English or Welsh Scots, and really becoming a real team and group just because it was a one-off game. But on the other side, I'm delighted. I think of myself as an Irish international and a British and Irish Lion. And that was at a time when it was hard to get picked in the team. Nowadays, they might pick a squad for the next Lions tour. There could be 40, 45 players picked. There could be another 5 to 10 that join the tour party as they're out there. Whereas back in our day, there was a team in subs picked for that one. I do consider myself as a test Lions player, but lost out a wee bit on that experience of touring with the Lions as well. So,
And say that was a good experience just to go there, away with the lads, have fun, and you came home to see your own family, and that's nice too.
absolutely,
You know?
no, absolutely, no. It's a wee bit of both. We were chatting sort of about the acting things on the pressure and so on. Yeah, you go into it, there's some trepidation and nerves, knowing that it's a big match, and all the other players in the Lions opposition, they're the best in the world from around the world. So it's you've got a wee bit of nerves going into the match, but it was really nice to play with some of the people from Scotland, Wales, England that I wouldn't normally mix with in that sort of situation. It's normally your opposition rather than your teammates. And we've had the odd reunion from that as well. It's lovely to see them again.
It's one of those standout occasions, though, in rugby, that particular game, the Lions versus the rest of the world. It's not something that has happened again
No,
since.
no, it's
It's a unique event.
yeah, yeah. Oh, no, delighted to be a part of it. As I a couple of my friends, Ringland and Irwin, had been across in the '83 tour to New Zealand, and just even sort of being on 2 or 3 steps away from that, but training with them in preparation for them going out on tour and following them round, on tour from a distance was great. So actually, then to be a part of that was lovely as well. But as I say, I've been really lucky to have success, like being picked for the Lions. But there's also sort of nearly been the other side of the coin, the disappointment of not getting away on the tour. So yeah, it's highs and lows all the way through.
That's sport, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just recently, and I mentioned this and purely in passing, there has been a professor who has done some research, and he's been out this week pushing the line that having people under 18 playing full contact rugby is akin to child abuse. Now, I mean, my thought when I read this stuff and then heard him being interviewed was that his specialist subject was using inflammatory language to get headlines. And I suppose he's succeeding by the fact we're even mentioning it here. But as it is, interesting thought that everybody will have their own ideas on that. And it's a bit like all sweeping generalizations, Bits of them are right, maybe, but a lot of them is.
I think by the time you get to 18, there are not many people that are coerced into playing. It's a choice whether you play or not at that stage. And so I think that those people that are playing it are doing it largely by choice. And maybe there's pressure, perhaps in their family or from their friends or whatever. I don't know. But I think there's lots of choice in sport and lots of other things that they can do, and there's lots of things that outside of sport, and in a way, I think all the sports might be a little bit concerned as to the reduction in numbers where people choose to play video games or whatever else rather than play active sport, tennis, rugby, football, or whatever else, Gaelic games or whatever else. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where he's coming from there. I think they choose to do it. I do understand maybe individuals that play, or certainly parents and family that might have concerns seeing big tackles and so on in rugby settings. I think it's important that people are coached appropriately, to make sure that they're not putting themselves at risk. But no, I think part of the attraction and the love of rugby is that sort of the big hits and so on as well, the big tackles, say it's very seldom that you see a significant injury, and I hope that they reduce even further.
We leave the final word on that to our mutual friend Trevor Ringland, who I bumped into and I was asking him what he'd been doing, and he said, "Oh, I'm one of the things I'm doing is looking after tag rugby at Hollywood Rugby Club." I said, "How is it?" And he said, "Difficult." I said, "Difficult? What's difficult about it?" And he said, "The kids all want to play, but they want contact rugby. They don't want tag rugby." And this is where we have the dilemma. And there'll always be people who want to. It's, I suppose, in a way, people who ride motorcycles. People say they've just ban it. That's it. Just ban it, and that'll sort it. And that's fine. But if you think about it, if they were to ban it, it would still happen underground.
Yeah.
So it's better that it's controlled, and it's the same in any sport. That's why the rules are there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think things like I say motorcycle racing, equine events, horse jumping, that type of thing. I mean, there's an element of danger in numbers. But I think in some ways there's an attraction, sort of partly through that. So as long as the risks are low enough, then I think many people are very happy to participate in them. But still keep in touch with Trevor regularly, and don't always take his advice in all matters. But he's been a great friend.
Yes. There were some great guys around at that time you played with, from Trevor and Keith to Big Willie and Jimmy McCoy. Jimmy McCoy used to work in his day job in Dungannon, and I used to do a Saturday night at the Inn in the Park. So when I would go on at 11 o'clock, Jimmy would appear at the side of the stage with a pint and observe. And there would be one of the things that happens in those situations is you get people coming up asking you to play specific songs. Would you play Layla? Okay, I'll play Layla. So you play Layla, And then they come back and said, "You said you would play Layla." I said, "I've just played it." And you realised they had sufficient quantities of the old electric soup that they weren't quite registering what was going on. Enter Jimmy, who would walk over, say to them, "Can you do this?" They'd put their arms up. He would lift them under the elbows, carry them off the stage, down to the back of the dance floor, and appear back and say to me, "Where did I leave my pint?" "There it is there, Jimmy," you know.
They're great fellas. Say, I mean, just talking about like Northern Ireland and the world stage as well. I mean, Willie was a fantastic player. His son Jonathan now
Oh,
fantastic. You know, doing so well. He dressed Rihanna, I think, in the Super Bowl
yeah,
one
before.
removed.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So again, love to see how the success he had. Jimmy is, as well has been a great and moved, of course, from Dungannon
Yeah,
to Bangor
Bangor. Yeah,
for various reasons.
yes.
And he would have talked about Helen's Bay being part of his patch.
Yeah.
And or as he would describe it, Baywatch. He was
Baywatch. And you know he means it.
So yeah, it's still not as frequently as I'd like, but still meet up with those guys times. We've a wee group of a lot of those 80s people, maybe meet at Christmas times and
Yeah.
so on as well.
Yeah, well, I'd love to be a fly on the wall at one of those. Listen, when I first approached you about doing this, James said to me, "Well, what did Nigel say?" I said, "He said he's happy to do it, but what are we going to talk about?" Uh, we could be here for another hour, couldn't we, James?
We could if we try, yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, thanks for.
It's been a real pleasure to come along, and it's been a pleasure to see the fantastic success that you've had, James, very recently. I say I can remember coming for the book so long ago, and I think you were around the house at that time, a good bit younger. We're all a good bit younger then.
Yes.
So it's fantastic to see how well you've done, and a pleasure to be along.
Honestly, that wasn't even yesterday.
No, absolutely, day before at least.
Thanks, Nigel.
Nigel, thanks a million.
My pleasure. Thank you.